Okay, we are live.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday briefing. I guess, Mike, you're up. CEO.
Welcome, council, members of the public. This is the first COVID-19 ECC briefing we've done with the public stream. So this should be, very informative. We've got a lot of information to go over. I'm going to try very hard to keep this within the time frame because I realize that other council and other members of staff have other commitments beginning at 1400 hours. Very quickly, and just to give a heads up to council, some of the stuff we go through, it might be a repeat. So I'm just trying to hit at a high level so we can get a better understanding and some more information out to our public. But we'll also try and move on at a fairly quick pace. If I'm going too quickly, let me know. If you have a question midstream, I'll allow you to manage that, Mayor Stewart. Wanted to quickly, and for the public's edification, introduce the command staff that are in this room right now. To my right is our planning chief, Kendra Raymond. Myself, Mike Schwartz, as the Director of Emergency Management. To my left is our Public Information Officer, Mike Berezowski, and barely in the screen is our Situation Lead, Everett Cook. Everett was also our Planning Chief for probably the first half of our standing up of our ECC, which began with a soft stand-up on March 13th and a hard stand-up on March 16th. And we've been going ever since, so it's like day 79. We are in week 3 of the stage 1 opening, and as you can see from Alberta Health, the numbers are staying very favorable. Alberta is doing an outstanding job, and so is Beaumont. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I wanted to, Lauren, could you please put up the org structure? This might be too busy of a slide, but we wanted to, again, for the public's edification, put up the ECC structure. We wanted to talk very briefly about the ECC. Now, the organizational structure on the top is what was in place on March 23rd. That was about 10 days into the pandemic. And the organizational structure you see on the bottom is, as it says, May 28th. I throw that up there just for a high level of the explanation around the ECC. We stood it up hard on March 16th. When you look at on the left under the orange is the operations section, and you can see how busy that is. A week before that, under the blue, the planning section, that's what it looked like. So in the exercise of emergency management, obviously we did a lot of planning in the first week or so, and then we operationalized it. So this represents, about after a week, starting to operationalize these plans. As we've progressed through the pandemic, we have been in a position that we believe now that the information is coming less fierce, and the need to act there's more time and distance between that. So we've downscaled the structure of our ECC, but we've also relying heavily on our operations. Some distinct differences in our ECC. Well, under council's direction, we took on 3 major focuses of the ECC, and that was one was community safety. The other was core service delivery, so there was no interruption. And the third began again on the first day, and this is unlike what a lot of other ECCs did and all of our regional partners, is we ramped up our business continuity and relaunch strategies on day 1. And our theory there, and with council support, was we want to hit the ground. We want to save and continue as many businesses as we can in our community. We also want to come out of this thing ramped up and helping all of our businesses in our community. So that planning and operationalizing started on day 1, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. The other significant difference we did, and it goes along with that number 3 bullet, is council didn't postpone or cancel a pile of capital projects. In fact, in the ECC, we identified upwards of $30 million more of capital projects, maintenance, things we can do in our community in hopes of receiving some stimulus money. I know a lot of our regional partners, for their reasons, absolutely postponed capital, canceled capital, reallocated capital. We didn't. And again, council's direction was, let's hit the ground running when we come out of this. So we're continuing to operate the ECC in the structure that you see below. Our hours are a little different. We have a briefing at 0900 on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We also have a briefing at 1600 on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we are in the Ccbcc full-time, the command staff, the structure you see at the bottom, on Tuesdays and Fridays. We began that structure this week. Up until that point, we were going basically 7 days a week with 5 days a week on the ground here in the CCBCC. Again, driving those three core deliverables being community safety, service delivery, and this relaunch strategy. We've experienced one case in Beaumont, and I meant to say this earlier, is well done to the person who had that case and was able to recover and not pass it along to anybody else. I also pass that along as a tribute to our community. Our community has done an exceptional job, and our Chief Cook is going to talk a little bit more from a municipal enforcement's perspective and share some of that information. The other key driver for the organization, the ECC's approach and the communities, and again with council's direction, is to follow the public health orders. That's what we've been doing. We've been doing nothing magical. It's been following the lead of the province. And that sometimes moves and it bobs and weaves, and we've had to change direction periodically, frequently, and we've actually figured that that's going to continue. Council, back in the beginning of when the ECC was stood up, was presented with a budget of $250,000 for COVID-related activities. That was based on a percentage similar to what a lot of our regional partners were doing. Council approved that budget. That budget has been used on things like we increased waste collection at the direction of council with the notion we had more people at home that waste was going to increase. So we did that almost immediately. Council increased a donation to the food bank. Council has approved the purchase or rental of more vehicles for our parks division because of a physical distancing. We can't put people in our side-by-sides and we have to have crew cabs. So we've done that. We also, council approved the increase of street sweeping. The notion there was we got more people stuck at home. We have spring coming at that point in time, and we were expecting people to get out. So we beefed up and contracted out to get our street sweeping done in half the time that we typically do. And then there was a bunch of incidentals that we've paid for as well, around laptops for people working at home and things like that. Council also early on in this process was presented with the data on transit. We saw our numbers drop significantly on March 13th. The day of the province basically shut down. Numbers went to single digits, and in some cases 1 and 2 people per day. When that data was presented to council, the decision was made to shut down transit. But it came with the direction to find an alternative, and with council's help, we were able to focus people or redirect them to a nonprofit organization called Drive Happiness. Now they have been providing rides for 4 residents who still require that to get to work. They've done 40 trips. If you recall, Drive Happiness came to council as part of the community grant request, and council approved an $8,000 grant. So that's great for those 4 people, and it's economically wise, it's a very good deal for our community. So that was a good service. I talked about the increased street sweeping. The second pass is now completed. Again, it was to accommodate people getting out into the community. I know I'm going fast here. Our parks crew is now up to full staff. Again, thanks to the approval for the more vehicles, as we have to respect physical distancing. We did not get those in place immediately. So as we've been following the provincial guidelines, we've been slowly ramping up to get our staff up and operating, and they are doing that now. As far as staff, we have a combination of people working in different buildings, respecting the maximum occupancies, and we have people working at home. Our buildings are closed to the public. For the most part, we've been accommodating bill payments electronically, and of course, they can drop them off in the drop-off box outside. The province has been holding weekly town hall meetings. This week, they actually had 4. And the intention of this week, there's another one later this afternoon. The one this afternoon or this evening is to talk about gyms, studios, arenas, and sports fields. And what they've been doing in these town halls is passing along information, but also gathering information. There was 4 of them, as I mentioned, this week. One of them on Monday dealt specifically about libraries and the strategies of reopening libraries. Another one talked about personal services, where they had owners of those establishments suggesting that they, for the most part, can open, and here's why. So now what the province is doing is taking that information and going to come up with some recommendations on what stage 2 looks like. Stage 1, I mentioned, opened 3 weeks ago. Stage 2 was scheduled for June 19th. The province has already said that they're going to bump that up. And they've also said that they're going to include some stage 3 activities or openings as part of stage 2. This has been consistent of the province, and the province has done a really good job. What we found in the ECC is we get this information 11th hour. A perfect example was 3 weeks ago today on Thursday, and they announced stage 1 opening, and it meant golf courses and a couple other facilities. Parks were open the next day. So what it does is cause you to scramble around getting orders or getting the protocols in place. The approach we've been taking is fairly slow and methodical and based on fact. We found that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you can knee-jerk really quickly if you just go off the first bit of information that you receive. We've recently found out from the province, if you recall, we talked that recreation facilities are closed, and they still remain closed as per Order 18220. But what we found since our last update is the province has now has allowed the operation of day camps in recreation facilities. Until last week, that was exempt. The effect that can have to our community is we can open our summer camps here in the Ccbcc. Our community center is considered a recreation facility by the province, but this exemption under 18220 now allows us to do that. We have joined our regional partners, and more information to follow for our Canada Day celebrations, and we're going to a virtual Canada Day celebration. And when I talk about our regional partners, they include the town of Devon, City of Fort Saskatchewan, Spruce Grove, St. Albert, Stony Plains, Strathcona County. So more information will be to follow, and you'll be able to get some of that information on our website. I'm going to talk a little bit about building permits, and then I'm going to pass it over to our Protective Services Director. If I could throw up a table here, this is a representation, and I should have been clearer on the first 2 columns. Those are May numbers. So total number of permits in May 2020 are 71 as opposed to 2019 of 58. This thing tells a number of stories, and when we talk about economic and business development later on in the briefing, I'll give you a little bit more information. You look at the home renovations, they're twice as much as they were this time last year. That makes perfect sense. More people are home. Those numbers are reflective and very comparable to last year's numbers. If you look on the 2 columns on the right are the year-to-date numbers. So Beaumont is still seeing that growth. You're going to see, I'm going to talk a little bit about business growth, and it's like looking at like 6.5% is what Rob is sharing with me. So through all of this, we're still growing. The construction value at the bottom of May 2020, that the spike is due to the renovations for the high school. So that permit was submitted. So the other story it tells us is it's business as usual out there for the city and for councils, and we're continuing to move stuff. Our council meetings are continually to be busy as they were. And on top of that, we're dealing with the community dealing with the pandemic. So overall, there's great efforts being put forth by everybody. I want to allow our Protective Services Director to talk a little bit about the municipal enforcement and the trends we saw and what we did about that and the reaction of the community. So I'll pass it over to Chief Cook.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, folks. Again, as Mike mentioned, a little bit of this information you've heard in some of our previous updates. However, we felt it's relative to cover it off again as we go through this Protective Services report. As an overview, we did a hard launch of our ECC on March 16th, and of course, that's when a lot of unknowns about COVID-19 were being circulated and municipalities were starting to react, but how we were to react, we really didn't know. So a lot of the measures that were taken to protect staff was to put them into a lockdown, if you will, or at least to reduce exposure to those essential services, and I'm speaking from a protective services standpoint, to reduce exposure and access to protective services staff so those services could continue. Starting off with the RCMP, as mentioned, they did reduce access to their building. Of course, as an essential services, they need to maintain those services to our residents. And access to the building, that's to our city staff working within the building and the officers themselves, was greatly reduced. In fact, measures were put into place to go through a series of testing questions and such before a person was allowed to be enter the building and to actually be interviewed by a member. And of course, other methods of interviewing were being utilized by members whenever possible. The RCMP continued to take an approach of education, then to inform, and then to enforce. And that's very similar to our municipal enforcement department or service area here at the city of Beaumont. Speaking specifically to COVID-19 related calls, the RCMP since March of this year have dealt with 9 calls, one of which was under the Federal Quarantine Act, and that had to do with travelers returning by air travel, of course, and potentially not self-isolating. They were monitored, they did comply, no warnings or violation notices were issued. 5 calls for assistance, or 5 calls came from Alberta Health Services with regards to COVID-19, and that was direct to the RCMP. 1 was issued a warning, and that was for not self-isolating. That was after out of town or out of country travel. 3 were handled specifically by Alberta Health Services and were passed to the RCMP for informational purposes only. And 1 call was handled by the RCMP, which resulted in a warning being issued as well. It's important to note that no violation tickets have been issued by the RCMP with respect to COVID-19. 3 additional COVID-19 calls were addressed by the RCMP, and of course this makes up the total of 9, and resulted in warnings being issued as well. Those were driven by members in proactive patrols or complaints received direct, again, to those RCMP members. They did not come through Alberta Health Services. Today, the RCMP is moving towards reopening the detachment. That's a K-Division initiative, and of course, K-Division spanning the province of Alberta, that would encompass all of the detachments. But it's important to note that the RCMP have a pilot project which is underway right now where complaints can be submitted online. And that will allow, obviously, for physical distancing to take place. And in addition to that as well, it will allow those complaints to be vetted through, if you will, and responded to accordingly. Again, that's to reduce physical contact, and in some cases, potentially expediting the need for a partner with a response from the RCMP to address a complaint. As we get more information from our detachment commander with regards to that initiative, we will pass that along. We're excited to hear about it, and of course, with the new normal that we're living within, it's an excellent opportunity to watch and perhaps impose for our own municipal enforcement services. Moving on to the fire service, Beaumont Fire Service, we did close the building to the public and any visitors actually prior to our ECC being launched, and that was we started that with the cancellation of our school tours. That is very unfortunate. Of course, we look forward to having our public and our youth and our kids back in the fire hall. However, that was an initiative, again, taken to protect our essential service, our firefighters. Further to that, too, we've even reduced access to the fire hall for off-duty fire service personnel. And of course, we changed and modified our response protocols to address COVID-19. Specifically, medical calls were addressed first, and that included additional PPE, personal protective equipment, for firefighters being donned prior to entering a facility, additional screening questions to be asked. Now, it's not only by the 911 dispatcher, but that's also by responding firefighters or Alberta Health Services crews when they go to an individual who either is suspected of having COVID-19 or displaying some symptoms of COVID-19. Finally, decontamination procedures were also created and implemented as well, and that has to do with the laundering of equipment, discarding of personal protective equipment, such as face masks, which are a one-time use as well. Again, the goal is to protect our first responders. To date, a total of 176 calls for service has been responded to by the fire service. I didn't bring out the total breakdown of the calls, but what I can tell you is that 8 structure fires or reported structure fires have been responded to this year so far, year to date. And we continue to conduct fire inspections. That includes fire pits and building inspections, of course, with physical distancing measures being taken. As we start to move towards phase 2 of the province of Alberta's relaunch strategy, Fire Service Administration has created and is about to pass along to the ECC a reentry plan for our fire service, which will start to relax some of the restrictions, opening our doors back up, not only to our off-duty members, but to the public as well. Moving on to municipal enforcement, of course, the focus of municipal enforcement, specifically through the pandemic, has been to assist enforcing the public health order passed on to us by the province of Alberta, responding to public complaints, so business is normal, and of course to conduct proactive patrols throughout the community. Those proactive Patrols are a part of our everyday business. They allow officers to be seen in the community. They allow officers to identify concerns within the community. And in this case with COVID, they allow officers to not only visit parks that were closed at one time, putting tape and signs back up if it should have come down, but of course to get out, educate at a good, safe distance our residents on needs to physical distance from one another. To aid in maintaining physical distancing and to support the RCMP's initiative to protect their staff and the detachment, we did relocate municipal enforcement services to the Ken Nickel Recreation Center. They are in a dedicated space which provides them physical distancing, so safety when there's more than one officer in the area. And again, that was something we put in place, or a step we took, that we put in place to support the RCMP. In addition, a casual bylaw officer was also hired to assist with addressing community needs. Specifically, this officer, and you'll see here in just one moment, was hired to work evenings on the weekends. One of the things that we did as we went into COVID-19 was to monitor call volumes, because as we know and understand, residents working from home or potentially being laid off are at home. They're a little bit more sensitive perhaps to their surroundings or notice a bit more. And so we anticipated a rise in call volumes. Just before jumping into a couple of charts, I would like to pass along that year to date for 2020, as of this morning, 661 files have been generated by municipal enforcement. 120 of those files are specifically related to COVID-19. 4 have been complaint driven, so that's complaints received through municipal enforcement from residents, and 116 of those files were generated by our own officers conducting proactive patrols in the community. 21 verbal warnings were passed along or issued to our residents on multiple occasions. Conversations were had with adults and youth and children with respect to physical distancing. So our officers have been extremely busy and being proactive in this COVID-19 pandemic. I do want to point out that in 2019, in the exact same time frame, 447 files had been generated. I'm going to ask a couple charts. They're up there now, table 1, 2, and 3 to be brought up. Specifically looking at these charts, and as I mentioned, we started to look at calls being made or called in by our residents after hours. And this was tracked with the assistance of the RCMP and our local detachment commander. Notable increases for services did come through our answering service, specifically general noise complaints, loud music, and animal-related complaints were the main 3 drivers of the additional calls that we started to receive. Beginning to track this data since March 16th to be specific, you'll notice an increase or a spike in calls on starting Thursday afternoons and running through the weekends. Table 2 will show you the time of day and the number of call frequencies, or pardon me, the number of calls that were received. So for example, on Saturdays, we've totaled off 25 additional calls have been received, and they were typically being generated around the 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock hour at night. 17 calls in the 11 o'clock hour, 12 calls in the 10 o'clock hour, and 6 in the 9 o'clock hour. As you can see, that is of course when those calls are starting to be received. To address this, municipal enforcement or protective services adjusted the hours of municipal enforcement. We did bring on that extra casual bylaw officer, and we are about to move towards hiring our seasonal bylaw officer, which is a planned position, an annually planned position. Monday and Tuesday, our hours are the same, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. But you'll notice starting Wednesday, we've started to increase our hours. So beginning again at 8 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays, our officers are on patrol and available. And then on Fridays and Saturdays, we're working 8 a.m. to midnight. It's important to know that when our officers work late in the evenings, typically after 8 o'clock in the evenings on Fridays and Saturdays, they're not alone. There's 2 of them riding together. That is our casual bylaw officer. And then Sundays as well, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., our officers are available to address any complaints that are called in. Looking forward, and as I mentioned, seasonal bylaw officers will be recruited. Proactive patrols will continue throughout the city. And of course, we will continue to work with the RCMP and Alberta Health Services should a request come in to investigate any COVID-19 related complaints. And that is my report.
Thank you very much, Chief Cook. I'm going to pass it over to our Public Information Officer and give us an update on some of the communications activities.
Thank you. So as Mr. Schwartz earlier mentioned at the outset, there was a considerable amount of information, a lot of it maybe not the most accurate. So that was one of our challenges right off the get-go. And with the activation of the Emergency Coordination Center, we of course also activated our crisis communications plan, which complements the structure of the ECC. At the outset, we wanted to establish a source of accurate, up-to-date information. So we did that with the Beaumont, Alberta.ab.ca website, with the page beaumont.ab.ca/COVID-19. That has been the anchor piece for all of our communications, where we're keeping information up to date, accurate, updates, some of the updates from the provincial government and federal government, as well as what's happening with the city's response, so the residents have a single source of truth about COVID-19 in the community. During the peak of traffic, we were seeing upwards of 1,600 visitors to the page per day, and it continues to be in the top 3 pages visited on our website, often the #1 page on our website since early March. We've supplemented that as well with special edition communique, the insert that goes out with the utility bills. In May, we did a special edition of the communique with information about the city's programs and services and supports available to the community through the city of Beaumont, and as well as newspaper advertising, interviews, and signage throughout the community. We also did prepare a brochure, an informational brochure that was distributed to businesses and community voluntary organizations throughout the community as well. On social media has also been one of our primary channels. It has been very well received in the community. We have seen tremendous amount of reach, of engagement from the community on particularly our Facebook page, but also on Instagram. The single highest day, notably, was on May 21st when we announced the reopening of outdoor spaces, where we had just a single day reach of more than 17,000 people. I'm going to move over to the Open in Beaumont campaign, and that is a campaign that we partnered with the Chamber of Commerce on, using the hashtag Open in Beaumont. It is primarily started as a social media and web campaign. Since it launched on April 9th, we've had a cumulative total reach of more than 31,000 people from the post just on our city counts alone. That is Facebook and Instagram. That doesn't include posts from the Chamber, from local businesses, as well as customers. As of this morning, the total number of Instagram posts were over 675. That's primarily from local businesses and residents posting their support of local businesses. And we saw, again, single highest day reach was on May 30th this time, when the city opened the green space in Centreville behind the buildings on 50th Street and 52nd Avenue. And that single day, we saw a reach, and this is total reach of posts using the Open in Beaumont hashtag, of 29,500 people. 29.5 thousand people saw posts that used the hashtag Open in Beaumont on that single day. And that's not just city posts, that's businesses, local businesses using that hashtag as well. It was very well received when we did that initiative just the other week. This week, we're starting to move into the next phase of the campaign with some regional marketing. The publication, the 2020 Summer in the City Guide, has a total regional distribution of more than 110,000 copies throughout the Edmonton metropolitan region. That includes 40,000 copies on news racks, as well as 70,000 copies direct mailed to homes in the region. Beaumont will have a significant presence in that publication, and it will drive people to our website, where we have information about activities, events, and local businesses, as well as continue to promote the Open in Beaumont campaign. And as it happens, the heaviest distribution rates for the publication are in South Edmonton, which is our target market for the region. Later this summer, we will also begin targeting some social media to the regional markets too, with some paid buys, but that's yet to come.
Good. Thank you very much. I'll continue on that vein and talk a little bit about the business and economic development activities that are ongoing. as the PIO mentioned, we're starting our business walks, and I understand some counselors need to leave this meeting at 1400 hours because they're scheduled to start taking part in those. We're getting very good feedback that we're reaching out and staying in contact with our local businesses. The surveys and the calls to the home-based businesses are also starting this coming week, again, to see what their needs are and see how they can be helped and supported in our community. COVID Connect is now open for members. They have a safety meeting scheduled for Monday. So current members will be able to come back to work, respecting physical distancing, come back to the facility, and we will again take on new members with the protocols are in place. We've confirmed 3 mobile vendors to date, working with potential on the 4th, and they're going to be set up, or the spot is one of them, and they're set up at the Lions campgrounds, and the others will be in Centreville. The Centreville Market is a go for this year with the collaboration between economic development and the local community. They've decided to move it to a Thursday night market from 5 till 9 p.m. So they're thinking with many citizens leaving town on the weekend, it was felt that a night market in the region could be more successful. So that's set to begin on June 18th with 7 to 8 vendors, and they will be up around Centreville, and obviously the proper distancing and requirements will be in place. Council may also notice some local businesses expanding and some new ones opening. We have a new bakery in the north end of the city, Beaumont, I think is the name of it. I'm not sure, it's opening in the Beaumont Plaza across from the Ken Nickel, same place as Sea Chain, and the Virtue Boutique in Beaumont Center is expanding. So those are some positive indications. We'll talk a little briefly about the recreation projects. Public engagement on the outdoor rinks closes Friday, June 5th. So far, we've received some feedback by email, and there were 45 surveys have been completed. We'll go through them on Monday, and we'll come up with some themes, and of course, those will be presented back to council. Public engagement on the basketball court is also underway, and it closes on June 10th. And we are about to go out to the public for the Colonial Pocket Park playground enhancement. So hopefully that goes out early next week. Again, all of those things will come back to council. Special shout out from our rec folks to the Recreation Parks and Culture Committee. For supporting, they've been very supportive on administration on the development of the concepts, and have done just an extremely good job in brainstorming. The comment that was passed along to me is that so far, this group has been very exciting to work with. So that's pretty cool. Communications is going to be going to the BSRC tomorrow, and they'll create a virtual tour. This will be used in part to help the Society of the Arts for the Public Art Task Force to show them some suitable spaces where this public art can be placed in that building. As well, the virtual tour will be shared with council and with our Parks and Culture Committee. Shorter version will be made available. We'll put it on our website as well. So that's pretty exciting. Most exciting comments about that is what we've been saying all along, and it's on time and on budget. Looking at handling the keys over in mid-July. We haven't run into any supply chain issues, so that's positive, and we're happy about that. Got a couple more items here, and then I'll open it up for questions. One's fairly big. FCSS, current status of our childcare facility as of for phase 1 is full. That was as of June 1st. We're allowed 24 in the ELCC and 8 in after school, and those spots are full. We have 8 staff. Provincial licensing did an inspection of our facility on May 27th, and they're extremely pleased with the protocols that were put in place and the way the cohorts are established and how the staffing, so no issues were reported. Currently in phase 1, each cohort is able to have a maximum of 10 people. So as I reported earlier to council, with the launch in June, there was some grant funding that came across that allowed us to maintain our 80% cost recovery. In fact, we're significantly higher. So we've crunched some numbers to see where we need to get to continue with the 80-20, and I'll share that with you in a second. Currently, there are 34% of the child care centers in the province have been opened as of June 1st, with obviously the restrictions. We were on a call with Minister Schultz a couple days ago, and wasn't able to provide any guarantees for increasing those child care spaces in phase 2 of the relaunch. So we're waiting for further direction from Dr. Henshaw. If the spaces could be increased, they might consider 20 spaces per cohorts. So this includes the required staff. For us, that would mean 50 ELCC spots and 18 after school. This would allow us to maintain our cost recovery. That would put it at about 84%. So that's well within our policy. Footnote is that the policy talks about annual, the ability to maintain it annually. So if we run into some glitches, and then this will come back to council, we'll have to make the decision on whether we can recover in some other ways. We're somewhat optimistic that either later in phase 2 or certainly early in phase 3, we are going to get that 20 spaces per cohort clearance from the province, which, like I said, would keep us at 84%. If we didn't, and we were reduced to the 32 spaces we have now, cost recovery beginning July 1st dips down to 61%. We will be bringing this information back to council before July 1st to talk about scenarios. We did look at if in phase 2, because the province has talked about the 75% capacity. If we were able to do that, we would be in the cost recovery in the mid to high 90s. So more information is definitely needed as far as childcare is concerned, and we're in regular contact with Alberta Health. Lauren, can you put up I just sent you a picture midstream here. I want to talk about something, and then I'll finish off with a couple. We had, over the weekend, we had a tree come down, as you can see, in what is affectionately described as the Evergreen Mile. We've gone out and done an inspection, and we have a number of similar trees. Apparently there was a fire that had gone through there in years past. There had been some drilling into roots. Also, the laying of the asphalt trail has damaged the root structure. So what we've just discovered in the last couple of days is we've got a problem that we need to fix. So there'll be some emergency trees repairs or removals occurring. You can go to the next one. It shows you the map. As council will be more familiar with it than I am. There's the Evergreen Mile, if you will. So we're going to develop communications here right away. We will notify the residents, but we're going to mobilize on this. If you recall, we briefed council a couple of weeks ago on a couple planned tree removals. Well, this one's not planned, but we were fortunate that we had this briefing that we could give you a heads up. So we will get as much communications out as we can on the emergency tree removals, because that one that came down obviously damaged some property as well. We want to prevent people from getting hurt. So a few more items just to wrap up. I talked earlier about the road forward and what it looks like, and what we're experiencing here in the ECC is the information, like I said earlier, while it's slowing down, it's moving and it's fairly inconsistent. One day we understand that stage 2 is June 19th, and here's what's going to be open. So now we start putting plans in place and operationalize those plans and getting the health measures in place so that we're ready to do this. And then it changes. Either something gets omitted or something gets added on top. So we're finding we're on our toes. Thursday afternoon and Friday afternoon, if you recall, we mentioned that we actually put
Still don't have you.
Notice some of our signs out there are getting damaged, and some of them are outdated as far as the closures. Those are on back order, and we're bringing them in on a regular basis. So right now the ECC is waiting on a lot of information while we finalize our stage 2, which they have communicated that in our stage 2 launch, one of the plans we're working on. We got 2 priority plans, and we're hoping to have a discussion after this meeting about one of them, and that is council chambers and the reopening of City Hall. Right now, it's quite a complicated scenario. The city of Beaumont, in my opinion, is in a more complicated scenario than some of our regional partners who have already done this. Their council chambers, their buildings, and the amount of people in the buildings is allowing them to open up ahead of time. For us right now, and we're finalizing in this operational period what it will look like to open our facilities under the current public health orders, and there's a considerable amount of work that needs to be done. So we're looking at interim measures and then obviously more permanent measures, but the 2 priorities right now are council chambers and City Hall. We just learned, and it's no longer embargoed, I know Mayor Stewart, you received this as well, that Edmonton is recommending that they not renew their state and local emergency. That's being presented at 13:30 hours, so 11 in public meeting. So that's that their approach. As you know, council elected not to declare a local state of emergency in Beaumont. We didn't think we were ever at the point where we needed that, and it turns out that was a very wise decision. Sort of winding down here and then open it up to questions. As you can see from the sheer amount of activity, whether it's day-to-day business or COVID related, administration and council have been working closely together to help our community, to protect it, but more importantly, but also to ensure that we thrive coming out of this pandemic. That's required a lot of quick, on-your-feet decisions that council has had to make. It was a result of, we had a number of special meetings, especially earlier on. And it's not on deaf ears that we appreciate that support. It has helped this community advance as far, and I have my opinion, further than a lot of our regional partners. We're in a different situation, which allowed us to do some things differently. But there's been resources provided by council. The quick decision-making that was done has allowed us to advance the goals that were set, and that's a tribute to how we work together. We also want to thank the community. I think our community did an exceptional job at following the public orders, in supporting each other, in respecting each other, in being patient. I still go back to the skateboard park. It's just kind of a fun thing for me. And, you know, we closed that. And yeah, we had a couple incidents where people were sneaking, but for the most part, they abided by it. And that's just a tribute to our community, in my opinion. It was great when it went open. I know I drove by there the first day and it was counting the people, but there was under 50, I'm sure. But for the most part, people have abided by it. So I think Beaumont's doing an exceptional job. With that, I will open it up to questions. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comprehensive overview for council and for our public today. It just goes to show the amount of work that has gone on since this started on day one. And as representative of council, I truly am appreciative of all the work that the administration has done to get us to this point. And I'd like to say I could see light at the end of the tunnel, but I think we still got a fair bit of work ahead of us. And hopefully the light that we can see isn't the train coming towards us. But anyway, I don't have any questions. It was really good. I'll open it up to members of council. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Figuratively speaking on the Zoom thing. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Just a quick question regarding the summer camp programs in the Ccbcc. Did I hear you say that had been authorized, that was now allowed? Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. They've allowed day camps such as our summer camp to operate in a recreation facility. So what we're doing right now is finalizing plans to potentially have that open here on July 1st. We have the ability to run a couple cohorts. So details to follow.
Okay, so there's a possibility that we could have those open. In that eventuality, then, does the Emergency Coordination Center stay in the Ccbcc, or does it move somewhere else, or does it close down altogether?
Yeah, no, it must move somewhere else, and we've got 3 alternative sites. One just came up this week, and that being back into the fire hall where we started. We've also considered being 100% virtual, but I don't think we're there yet. We tried to do that this week, and it's kind of disjointed. So we have some alternatives, but no, we will have to leave the site.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, thanks to CEO Schwartz for that update. I think that was really good and really highlighted a bunch of the nimbleness, if that's a word that has been required as we've moved forward here. One piece that you didn't mention that I think is very important is around the monitoring of social media and being able to try and find solutions all the time to little problems that pop up. And one of them might even be, garage sales, right? We saw that, and some inconsistently in the region, garage sales were allowed, and very quickly administration, surveyed the region, figured out, what was being done, what wasn't being done, and what some of the barriers were. And it turned out that we were able to get, garage sales back up to back available, and people were able to do them. So there were many little instances like that along the way where a high level of connectivity with the regional partners allowed some regional decisions to be made, so things weren't disjointed incredibly across the region. I know, try as you might, there were still some things that were different between communities, but I haven't seen a whole bunch of social media presence saying that this community is doing that, why can't we? So I think that's a testament to keeping on top of things. And one of the important pieces is the surveys of social media that both council and administration do and point each other's towards. So feather in the cap for that one. And thank you. That's what I got.
Mayor Stewart, if I could pass on another great example of that was through social media, we were able to pick up that there was a fundraiser scheduled. I think it was a week ago Saturday, or it was last Saturday. A group of teenagers were going to set up in their private driveway. That same group had asked us a week previous if they could go into Four Seasons. We said no. Then they posted on their Facebook that they were going to do a private function. So we were proactive and we reached out to them and said, you know, this qualifies as a special event, but let's help you get that permit into place. And within 24 hours, I believe, Municipal Enforcement had that permit in place, and that event took place last Saturday. We did do some monitoring. You allude to another thing about social media is the inaccurate information. We since saw a post this week that talked about dealing with a senior AHS official had said that those types of events are not allowed. And in fact, the only musician that can do anything is somebody in their backyard. So we immediately sent that to AHS and said, you know, what's going on? This is not consistent with the information we got, and it was proved to be inaccurate. So there's those dangers or risks out there as well.
Fair enough. Councilor Mungo-Swain?
Yeah, thanks, Worship, and again, appreciate all the efforts from administration here to help through this, and for council for setting some strong direction here. But I guess the only key thing for me, and it was kind of touched on earlier, that, you know, yes, done a very, very strong job, a great job in order to be able to, you know, get to a position where we are into that kind of, into that stage one there. But, you know, I guess the key thing I want to share is I'd hate for all the sacrifices that we made to be wasted. So we obviously to be successful, and in order for us to get to that second stage, even yes, here in Beaumont, you know, we still got to stay vigilant on this thing. And so, you know, some of the attitudes I've heard and had conversations with people is, you know, businesses are opening up, and therefore kind of perceptions are that, you know, this virus is gone. It's obviously not the case at all. And we just got to make sure that we obviously follow those public health measures and physical distancing, etc. So, you know, I think community's done a great job. I just hope we don't relax too much. And while we can still support our businesses, we don't relax too much here and then waste those good efforts. So that's all I had to say on that, and just appreciate everything that the community has done on this.
Thank you very much. Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart, and thank you to the administration. Great job keeping us informed and all the work you're doing. My question is just to follow up. You did tell us a bit about FCSS and what's happening there. I might have missed it, but do you have any stats on the types of calls we're receiving there, or any more information about the extra services that we're providing, the grants we've given out, that kind of information? It would be really, I think, important for us to hear that.
You know, that's a really good point. I wish I would have itemized them, and I have provided that information in previous briefings, but it would have been great to share with the public. So then I'm going to shoot from the hip, and then I can verify afterwards. As we progressed through this pandemic, we did see a lot of calls earlier on around food, people needing, not even the food bank couldn't keep up. So FCSS obtained a grant that allowed the gift cards to be sent out immediately. We have expanded a lot of the virtual counseling for people who need or struggling with mental health issues. We have been connecting a lot of people to get them signed up for the financial assistance, whether it be EI or the emergency relief. We also are doing a number of virtual activities in the community to keep people engaged. And I don't have the stats in front of me, the percentages, but they continue to be around those mental health and around, you know, getting people food on the table. So those types of things. Anybody else thinking of anything else that leaps out of them?
Yeah, so I was in conversation with the Leduc District Food Bank too, just the other week. I think, as council may be aware, council in the city has provided them with a $10,000 grant, and we will be, we're just waiting on a few details, but we will be making a larger announcement of that to the public. But it's very interesting to note too, it's a very interesting conversation that we had, that the food bank is seeing a lot of clients that they've never seen before. It's more into the middle class types of families where they've been recently, either their wages, their income is lower, or they've been unemployed suddenly, and so they've seen likewise, while they may be on federal benefit programs right now, they've seen a drop in their household income. So they've actually become more reliant on the food bank. So it's been very important, of course, that we're making sure that the food bank has resources to support those residents. Now, that said, it's still not a significant number of people, but it is still a new group of people that they haven't served in the past that have been accessing the food bank. So thankfully, those structures and those supports are in place in the community.
One follow-up, if I may, Mayor Stewart,
ahead.
just on domestic violence calls as well. I think we were told our last briefing that there might be some information shared in terms of where people can get that assistance if they do need to call someone. So I'm wondering.
Yes. Yeah, there was a post, I believe it was last week on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, that had links to resources, both locally and within the region. But just while we're talking right now, the Family and Community Support Services within Beaumont, they are that first point of contact. People can reach them at fcss@beaumont.ab.ca, and I don't have their phone number at my fingertips. But the team there is very able, they're very knowledgeable, non-judgmental, and quite compassionate, and they will connect people with, if they need any social services, if they need help with food, whether it's domestic violence or sexual violence taking place within the household. They are that place. They can be that first point of contact for people to reach out to, whether it's a women's shelter or counseling services or whatever supports they may need.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendricks for the final set of questions of the day.
Yeah, just a quick update regarding the Community Events Committee, which is meeting virtually every Wednesday night. Events are still being planned. Certainly Canada Day, we do have some COVID-19 sensitive planning that's happening for that day. We also have the 125 celebration, the grand opening of the new recreational center in September. Along with, we're also planning through September for the Alberta Cultural Days program. So hoping that the COVID-19 process continues to go in the right direction so we can maintain our energy and pulling all those events together. So the community will have lots to look forward to come September at least. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hendricks. Once again, thank you to Council and Admin, and that wraps today's briefing. I'll just leave it to the CAO for final comments if he's got any, and then we'll shut her down.
Just one thing we want to mention is that right now there is a survey out right now. We're asking residents what their experience has been accessing city services during the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affected them and their families. That survey is open until June 12th, and we will be utilizing that information as we work through creating efficiencies within how we deliver our city services virtually. So we're looking for feedback from the public, so please roll that out. It's available on our website. You need the link there, so please take a look and share that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So
My closing remarks would go right back to what Councillor Monkoff-Swains said, and that's great advice for our community. This may look like it's getting better, and it is, but it's a long ways from being over, so we have got to respect those public health orders. But thank you very much for your time and your support.
appreciate it, and we'll draw this meeting to a close.
You're
Thank you
gonna
very
stay